Welcome to another episode of Raz Unfiltered, where we unpack how art, faith, and community collide. It's completely unscripted, unfiltered, and this is episode 4. We're chatting about how nonprofits exploit our artists. Um, Now, this topic, we actually did part 1 in episode 3 last Wednesday, and it was a bigger hit than I thought it would be for you guys. So a lot of you guys messaged me on the side. You sent a lot of questions in the Q&A here. You also hit me up on Instagram and such, and it was a great session. So I decided, you know what? People have a lot to say about this, and people really want to uh, dig into it with me. So why not do a part 2? So I'm just gonna jump on Instagram Live here as well. Now, I had a friend of mine reach out and make a really good point. In episode 3, I mentioned arts organizations as the people I was talking about, like the organizations I was talking about that are not supporting our artists and ultimately exploiting them to sell tickets and raise money, et cetera, et cetera. Now, she brought to my attention that an arts organization is very different than a nonprofit or a charity. So, an art organization can be in the funding sector, can be public, and a lot of artists do actually work at these arts organizations for programming and grants and funding, etc. Um, but and so I actually used the wrong terminology at the end of the day. What I'm actually talking about is uh, specifically in our community, the nonprofits. It really is like nonprofits, charitable organizations, um, and they don't necessarily have to be doing fundraising specifically like an Islamic relief, but just bigger organizations that raise money or run events and stuff like that, not specifically arts organizations, which I did not realize is an actual designation for like these community orgs. So today I'm gonna bring back the heat on how these nonprofits, specifically in our community, especially Muslim ones, like to exploit our artists for their own gains and for their own agenda, which is in my experience. So in episode 3, we chatted a little bit about how these nonprofits like to claim that they have skin in the game for the artists, and they really want to support them and they want to elevate them and have them like tell the stories for our community. But then when the artist shows up, there is never really professionalism. There's never really accountability. They don't want to pay. They don't want to. They don't even know what to provide you. That's the crazy thing. I think it's one thing to not have the money to pay somebody like an artist. Cool. You're a nonprofit. You're trying to raise money. I can deal with that. We can figure. I have nonprofit rates. I've had them for a long time, so we can figure that out. Like we can sort that out. But what's crazy to me is you want to put on artists, and you want to you claim you want to elevate them and you want to support them, and but then when they show up, cool, you may not have the money, I still show up, but then like you don't have anything prepared for me. I don't get a sound check. You don't have any parking paid for me. You don't have food. You don't have anything prepared for this artist. So that tells me two things. You either don't know how to deal with artists or you really do not care. Like you really do not care. But in the lead up to all of this, when we're emailing and we're texting and we're trying to figure out like how do we work together, and you have all this stuff to say about the cause, and we want to raise for the cause. Which of course, the cause in and of itself, amazing. Glad you're doing it. That's why I'm involved. But when it comes to like compensation, that might be out of the question completely. And then, but then you have nothing else. Like no professionalism. You don't know how to do a sound check. You don't have the right sound equipment. You don't have the right people on the soundboards. You have some random volunteer who's never done this before running the sound. And so you've asked me now, as a professional artist who spent all this time in my career building my sound, building my brand, the same way you would have built a brand for your nonprofit. You want me to show up with half-assed production, not get paid, get on stage and use my brand in my face to give a crappy performance because I don't have the tools I need, and you expect me to be okay with that. And that's where it gets really, really frustrating. And so when that happens, and this is why I want to target like nonprofits in the Muslim community specifically, because I spent the first way more than half of my career, probably like 10 years, the first 10 years of my career. It's been 15 years. So let's say the first like 8 to 10 years I spent outside of the Muslim community. I worked with nonprofits, I worked with charities, I worked any and everybody outside of the Muslim community. Then in the last 5, 6 years, I started doing more in the community because I said, you know what? The changing in terms to music specifically and the arts, there's a lot more platforms for artists. I have a little more experience. So some of them reached out to me to like help them produce shows and stuff, which is amazing. They recognized they didn't have the expertise and they wanted to do more with artists. So they asked me to come in. Hey, salam, Sajad. Muslims in public space, what up? So a few organizations reached out to me and asked me to help produce the shows, which is amazing because they knew I had the expertise. And that's when I kind of came back into the community and started doing more shows with these nonprofits and organizations. Then I realized that like, oh, this is a trend. This isn't a one-off thing. Actually, the first show I did in the community was terrible. I showed up. They really wanted to book me, said they didn't have money, same nonsense. Oh, we don't have the money to do this. We don't have anything, but we're fundraising for this. We're fundraising for this. I show up. There's food everywhere. They have like vendors and everything's free under the ticket price for the attendees. But I show up. They told me they can't pay me, but they really want me and my drummer to come and play. I show up. There's not just me. I've actually never told this story before, so I'm really excited to tell this story. I show up and I think it's just me. They asked me to like headline. So I think it's just me and my drummer, and we're gonna do a performance. I asked them about the sound. They're like, oh, we got it covered. We have mics, we have everything. Right before I left home, I was like, I have an entire live sound system that I can take anywhere and perform. So I was like, I feel like I should pack all of this in the trunk because I don't know what to expect. I haven't done a show in the community with a nonprofit org in a long time. So I was like, uh, I just have a weird feeling I should pack all my gear. So I packed all my gear, went to the show. It was downtown Toronto. Drove around looking for parking. Directions to the parking were terrible. They didn't pay for parking. I have my drummer coming who now has 2 Junos and a Polaris. Like this guy is top notch, top of the industry in Canada. And it was a while ago, but now that's how good he was. Now that's where he's at. And he's drumming for me. And he's not Muslim. So we show up to this event. I walk in, again, food everywhere. People are dressed nice. It's in a really expensive like venue. And as I start sound checking, I'm like 2 hours. I'm always early. So I show up like 2 hours early. We're sound checking and I'm like, wait a minute. Where's the sound system? Right? Like where are we gonna plug in? Where are the mics? I'm gonna move you guys over here. Yeah, like what's going on here? Like what are we doing here? Like, where do I plug in? I have a drummer. Imagine trying to mic a drummer and they don't know how to do all that. And it turns out the sound system they had was like the conference room microphones that are like built into the ceiling in like this office space. So then I'm like, whoa, you told me you had gear and that you could host artists. I show up and you don't really have anything. I'm going to plug into the wall. Like, what are you talking about? And then there's 2 other artists opening who are also not getting paid. Who are actually good friends of mine now. And one of them's playing a saxophone and the other's playing a guitar. So I'm like, how are these guys going to perform with microphones with like conference room speakers? Like, this is crazy. Alhamdulillah, I packed all my gear. So now all of a sudden I'm setting up the entire show. Like I'm going into my car. We're making like 3 trips to bring speakers, to bring mixers, to bring microphones, to bring everything. Run all the wiring, plug it all in. And my guy who's on the drums is way better at the stuff than I am. And so now he's been paid by me and I'm coming out of pocket because I am not getting paid to do this show. Right? So I'm not getting paid to do the show. I'm paying this guy his rate to drum for me to put on the show for this community event. You don't have the gear. Now this guy who's not getting paid to set up all the gear and do tech because the organization was supposed to be doing that. Now he's also helping me plug in and do all this routing and sound system setup. So I'm pissed off because I'm getting not getting paid for this. He's not getting paid. Now I'm to ask a friend of mine who's not from the community, who doesn't understand like that this is like a thing that happens. I'm asking him to help me like set up the sound. And then they had no tech guy there, no tech girl, no tech guy, no nothing. So now I'm like, well, what are these other artists gonna do? Right? Like these guys, they have saxophone and they got a guitar, acoustic guitar, like they're screwed. So now I start running an entire sound check for all the artists there, like 45 minutes before people start walking in the door. That to me was like the worst case scenario. I had never had an experience like that really again, but they came close. And this is why these nonprofits and charity and or community organizations that like to use artists, and they of course they had my face and they had my bio and they had it all over their marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't even as like well known or as experienced as I am now, right? And still, they were like, "Oh, we really want this guy, so we're gonna market it." So they used my, again, if you don't know what this is, NIL is name, image, and likeness. They used my name, image, and likeness, marketed their event, sold out the event. By the way, didn't give any thought to the artist production, did not pay the artist, did not pay for a tech person. I did more work than I should have because, again, this is my brand. So I'm showing up with the drummer and it's also his brand. So we got to put on a show. That's my business. That's my life. That's how I feed my family. So we do that. It's a great show, but I leave there being like, you, and we were the main like entertainment. Everything else was like a mix and mingle and like networking. And then it was like us, the artists. So I was like, oh, okay. So you used me. Interesting. You used me. I still had to put on a great show because it's my brand. And now I'm leaving there being like, was this a setup? Like, did you just set me up for real? Like, because I leave out of there $400 in deficit. I did all this work for you and put on a great show. And now you're like, oh, thank you so much. We should work again together. And I'm like, work? It's not work if I didn't get paid for it. I became one of your volunteers. It was crazy. And so that's my person. I've had other stories. This was probably the most extreme. And yes, Sajad is saying here, when you call them out, we're the bad people. Exactly. I messaged them after and I let them know, like, this is crazy. This is not, and alhamdulillah, as bad as it might sound, this organization I don't believe exists anymore. So let me sip my coffee before I get worked up. They they don't really exist anymore for as far as I know. But that's when I started realizing, paying attention to this trend in our community with nonprofits. Like I really started paying attention to the way they speak to me, the way they speak to other artists. And it seems to be the same thing every single time. And I will say it's gotten better over time, but not that much better. Like it's really not that much better. And I do know that these organizations speak to me differently as like a male that's experienced in the industry. And because I have experience outside of the Muslim community, they do speak to me differently. They approach me differently. They work with me differently, which is terrible. My female artist friends have been treated way worse than I have. And so it forces me to start thinking about these situations and these organizations in a really dark light. And someone said in the Instagram chat, important to check the venue, ask about plugs even beforehand or who should go. Yeah. So in the story, I was saying that I asked for all that and they said they had it covered and they had a tech person and they did not. So we showed up and they ultimately lied or didn't know what they were talking about. But instead of asking for help, they just kind of like figured that I would figure it out. So when I showed up, luckily it was me. So I had all the gear and I learned, if you guys know Outlandish, old band with a couple Muslim guys on it. I've written and worked and toured in Germany and worked with Issam Bashiri, who's a big artist out there. And so I had learned a lot about like sound checking and all these types of things, but I was still green. Like this was like 12 years ago or something. Anyways, this happens over and over and over again, right? And so these nonprofit, and then I start to click in like, yo, wait a minute. Every time I go now, I'm like negotiating harder. So like, oh, we can't really pay you. Oh, this is the piece I want to touch on. They're like, we can't really pay you at that event, and at a whole bunch of at a whole bunch of events after that. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Now I have this crazy experience. I start asking them questions like, okay, well, who's doing all your social media posts? Oh, we've hired a designer. Okay, interesting. And where did all this food come from? Like, who's paying for all this food? Oh, we had a sponsor donate it. Okay, interesting, cool. And all the decoration and like the event planning and stuff. Oh, we hired somebody to do that. So I'm sitting there like, oh, interesting. So you were able to go out and find a sponsor for food. You were able to pay somebody to do the marketing and the design or whatever. You were able to pay somebody to set up the whole event and do decorations. But nowhere in that budget was it even a thought. There was even a thought to be like, oh, maybe we pay the people, the artists and the artists that are actually driving ticket sales. Because as far the designers posting, yeah, sure, but that designer's face and the business and their craft is not going to bring people in the door on the day of and entertain them and hold their attention and help you sell tickets and help you fundraise. That's not what they do. The food is great, but I do concerts where there is no food and we sell it out at 150 people, 200 people. So like, what are we even talking about here? So that told me over time that at no point was it in your mind that you were going to pay this artist. And this is where the whole thing comes up with like, oh, we're paying you an exposure. I had one argument with an organization like that and I never had it again. Because I would tell them straight up, like, what exposure? I'm bringing the people in the door. So what do I need exposure for? They already know me. They nowadays they probably don't even know your organization. You're coming to me because I have an audience. And so what it ends up feeling like, and I've had this feeling in a strong way many, many times. What it ends up feeling like is that they don't actually want to help. And they'll claim this too, like, we're gonna give you exposure, it's great for your career, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't actually care about my career. You don't give a crap about supporting artists. Because if you did, we would be in mind when you were budgeting in the first place, right? You have some sort of agenda to use me as an artist to sell your tickets and to fundraise. But it made me start thinking they might not actually want me to fully succeed. So they know that I'm good at what I do. They know that it'll help them sell tickets. They know people will be excited and want to come back to their future events because I helped entertain and put on a great event the first time. But I can't help but think, and I can't say who and I can't say what was said, but quite a few times, more often than not, I went, it seems like you know I'm really good at what I do. You know the community respects what I do, but you're worried that if I get too big, you won't be able to book me again, or I will actually demand payment and then you won't be able to pay me. Or I'm going to go tell other artists and they're not going to want to come to your events. That has happened so many times that as much as it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I felt it so many times that I can't help but not say it, especially in support of other artists. Because again, I've been around for a long time. I've put out quite a bit of music. I've done a lot of big shows. And so again, now they speak to me differently. And I feel like I got to say it. And then by exploiting instead of support, and then again, it comes back to what we said in episode 3. When you exploit as opposed to supporting our community's artists, you might sell tickets and you might whatever achieve your goals and have an entertaining night. But at the end of the day, you are directly disrupting and preventing our community's stories, our identities, our cultures, our narratives, our backgrounds, our families, our histories. You are directly preventing us from getting those stories into the mainstream. Okay? You're preventing those stories from getting into the mainstream and then getting to the masses where people can understand who we are and what we represent. So how do you expect people to think about Muslims and who we are and what we believe in any differently than what they think right now if you're not supporting us to get the stories out there? And yes, booking us and not treating us professionally and correctly is not supporting us. That is extremely harmful because there are other communities. The Ismaili community is one of them. The Jewish community is another one. Unbelievable at supporting their own companies, their own artists, their own food restaurants, like corporate businesses. They're amazing at it. And what does that do? You end up with a community like the Zionist community in mainstream media who for decades portrayed Muslims and Arabs and brown people in a specific way, right? They every time the event was called in a movie, there was some brown skinned people running with guns, kidnapping a little girl or something. They did that for decades. Run that on our big screens constantly. And we cry and complain about it and we're frustrated about it. And that's not who we are. Oh, we like peace. We don't. And at the end of the day, you can only cry so much until you realize that they were super organized. They were super supportive of their own writers. And so they got their perspective and their narratives out. They did. And they did it very, very, very well. Just so happens they used it against us. And then genocide happens in Palestine. And we're wondering why the whole world is just okay with it for like 2 years, probably, until people started going, wait a minute. I've seen 600,000 really gruesome videos now, and this seems maybe there's some injustice going on here. How do you think we got there? They've told people, they had told our stories and created the narrative for Muslims and for brown people in the mainstream media for so long that the rest of the world eats that, they absorb that, and that's what they know. So then how do we expect to combat that? Just yelling and screaming? Obviously, that's not working. There are more specific and integrated and communal ways to counter those narratives. And every single time, the most powerful aspect, the most powerful way and method of doing that is through the arts. It's through media and the arts. So that could be journalism, that could be TV, and then it goes into TV shows and TV, film, music, media in the mainstream. If we're able to tell our own stories and get them into the mainstream and get them flying into the mainstream, then we can own our narrative and we can take back our stories and we can start showing people who we are. But when our own organizations, and let's be real, in the Muslim community, especially in the GTA, the organizations with the money to put on events that are big enough to pay an artist or big enough to give an artist a platform are nonprofits. They're nonprofits. They have the cash to do it. All of our money goes to nonprofits. And I know a lot about the back end of that stuff for people that have worked in these nonprofits. That is probably another episode. But all of our money goes there. And so they give the platforms. And what happens is when you don't support the artists and you don't push for the artists and you don't treat us professionally and you don't actually want us to succeed, our biggest platform to get people to hear what we're saying and to tell our community stories doesn't exist. We now have nobody to platform us, or we have such a bad experience that we don't want to go back there. And then these artists end up in clubs and they end up at these white events and they end up at events that have no Muslims there. And then they're like, oh, well, that artist sold out. That artist doesn't represent the community. It's like, no, maybe you did nothing to support that artist. So they had to go get paid wherever they had to get paid. Right. And then on the flip side, we have somebody like Mustafa or Nema or a big artist blow up out of our community. And the whole time they were blowing up, they were getting there and they were fighting and they were trying to do these events. You didn't want to pay them. You didn't want to support them. Then they blow up, biggest thing on the planet. And everybody wants to claim the artist now. Oh, I knew them. We grew up with them. Oh, they performed at our event, blah, blah, blah. And I can guarantee you 98% of the time, if I go ask that artist, oh, what was your experience with that organization? Because they're saying they booked you and they gave you your first opportunity and blah, blah, blah. 98% of the time that artist is going to tell me, man, that was a terrible experience. I never performed or worked with them again. Right. So we like to scream about and cry about how people see us in the mainstream and how other communities look at us, but we don't actually want to take any steps to support our own to get to change the narrative in the mainstream. And so I don't know what we expect from that. And this is why I got into this a little bit on episode 3. And this is why a lot of people reached out to me and started having things to say, because it's not a new thing. Like, a lot of artists experience this. I'll be straight up, I've worked with a majority of the artists, Muslim artists in our city, and they all have the same experience. And so it may seem like a one-off thing, especially if you're not an artist. Like, if you're watching this live stream and you're not an artist and you're like, how does this affect me? That's how it affects you. Like, yes, artists are screaming for their money, they're screaming for like the respect, like to be whatever, like supported. But what happens to the rest of the community is your stories now, but that artist from your community that has your back, that's from your background, that's from the country you're from, etc., that artist now has no platform to tell your stories, not their stories. When they tell their experiences, they represent us. Like, as an artist, I carry my community with me everywhere I go. It's my identity. And most Muslim artists are like that. Not all artists are like that, but most Muslim artists are like that. So when we don't support them correctly and our nonprofits and our organizations don't support them properly, it's your stories. It's the audience's stories, your stories that do not get told. They do not get told well. There's no support for the artist financially or marketing wise or in like physical performance. And so the stories don't get told well. The artists don't get resources to help them develop and to grow. And because they can't develop and grow, they don't get better. They can't tell our stories better. They can't network outside of the community and get bigger opportunities. And again, we cry about the narrative and the stories being told about us in the media, but that's how it works. That's how it affects us as a community and as a people as a whole. And then again, you want to cry about how Zionist and American government and whatever shows Muslims and shows brown people and shows the Eastern Hemisphere. You want to cry about it, but there's a reason we got to where we got, where people can enable a genocide, not just be apathetic to it, but actually enable it. And do your research, man. It's there. Propaganda is just media. The first major propaganda that enabled the genocide was during Nazism, during the Nazi regime in Germany. The same tactics in the films that they were putting out, the books they were putting out, the stories they were giving to children, all art. They used the arts. They told the community, they told the population as one story and controlled the narrative through the arts. It was films, it was motion pictures, it was novels, they created characters. This is all artistry. And they got an entire population to believe that the Jews were the problem and we needed to exterminate them. Like, how crazy is that? And we didn't learn anything. So what did Zionists and the world powers that are now enabling a genocide in Palestine do? And enabling ultimately a genocide in Sudan, mass starvation in Sudan. What did they do? They just spent the last 30 years doing the exact same thing, but in a much more conniving and specific way, where it wasn't straight propaganda in your face, right? And they controlled the narrative, they told our stories, and now people see us and treat us however they want. So if we can't support our artists and recognize, like, do the research and recognize that these artists mean something to our community and that they represent us, then we can't expect really anything to change in how people perceive us. Because you walking around every day at work, people might not, especially if you're male, people might not even know you're Muslim, right? So how is that impacting? How is your everyday life impacting people's perspectives and perceptions of Muslim? It's ultimately not. I worked in corporate for a long time. It doesn't. Me being Muslim, unless there was a specific situation that came up, me being Muslim didn't change the way people thought of all Muslims necessarily, or it's very slow. But I could watch one movie that 6 million other people watched and change my whole perspective. So it's an important thing to pay attention to. And this is exactly how this is exactly why there's a direct link from these nonprofits and these organizations that hold the power to platform our artists. That's the link. That's what we got to pay attention to. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. There's a lot to say about this. If there's more topics you guys want me to cover or specifics within this that you want to hear about, shoot me a DM if you're on Instagram, if you're on YouTube. Uh, Punch it into the Q&A, into the chat, and we'll do it again. But I'm gonna leave this topic there for now because I feel like I'm on the brink of saying something that I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble for. So let's just leave it at that. If you tap in and you get into the live stream, you can dig through it, shoot me a DM, and we'll leave it at that for now. So I'm gonna leave it there. We'll spend the next like 5-ish minutes. I try to keep these like 30-40 minutes. So we'll spend the next 5-ish minutes doing Q&A. Feel free to like send your messages and let's just chat about it. I'm gonna drink this coffee. It's getting cold. And this is the chill part of the episode where I get to get your inputs and we can just chat about things on the topic or not. In the meantime, as these questions roll in, people are messaging me here. As I go through these questions, please do me a favor. If there was anything in this that you enjoyed, if it was informative for you, if it did something for you, just subscribe to the YouTube channel. And in the link under the YouTube video, or if you're on Instagram, in my bio, click on the YouTube link, subscribe to the channel, and then join my mailing list if you want more. And from the mailing list, we're starting to do a lot more exclusive content, live streams, and yeah, there's going to be unreleased music and everything's going to come through the mailing list. So if you enjoyed this, please share it with somebody, subscribe on YouTube, and then join the mailing list if you really want more. But yeah, let's roll through some of these questions. Oh, Anis, what's up, bro? People are jumping in the Instagram live. And Omer, the homies. Actually, you guys would really, really enjoy this topic. But we're in the Q&A section. So Anis and Omer, if you guys have any comments or questions about how nonprofits exploit our artists. We were just talking about how nonprofits in our community have the most amount of platform and power and resources, but when they don't want to pay our artists or treat them professionally, they directly impact and prevent us from getting our community stories told. And then that impacts how the world sees us and how they treat us ultimately, because we don't get to take control of our stories and our narratives, and we don't get to show them who we are. And so other people get to tell them who we are, right? And then you end up with a genocide, multiple genocides. But so Jad, oh, you threw some crazy questions here. They hired their son or daughter. Yeah, 100% they did. And it's funny because they probably hired them and they still probably paid them. I'm gonna be real. They still probably paid them, but they didn't want to pay the performing artist. They juice the resources out of the talented individuals. Bro, that could not be any more true. Oh my gosh. They juice the resources out of the talented individuals. Man, I could not tell you how many times I felt that way and how drained artists in our community feel. And there's also a thing to be said about Toronto. Actually, that's a topic that I'm going to cover. Let me write this down. Yes, that's one thing in our community is like juicing resources from talented individuals. But in Toronto, the vibes around artists and success is a very weird thing. I'm gonna do a whole episode on this. So just come back to the live streams and we'll chat about it. But there's this thing in Toronto, in the music industry specifically, where like I'll tell the story in another episode when I do this topic specifically. But there's I had an actor who was from Toronto but was moved to Brooklyn. I went down to see a show from my boy Hamza Haq was hosting a play. And we were talking about this topic about like talent in Toronto and why it's so difficult and why it feels like everybody's just trying to use you. And this goes for the Muslim community as well, but it's a Toronto thing. It's a bigger thing than that too. And he said to me, it's interesting because it seems like in Toronto, people cheer for mediocre because mediocre is not threatening. So when they see somebody who's like pretty good at what they do, but they're not amazing, they're excited. They cheer for them. They show up to the shows. They buy their tickets or whatever because they don't feel threatened by this artist. So because they don't feel threatened, they're like, yeah, I can cheer for them. But as soon as someone's really good at what they do and they're talented and they have resources, nobody wants to Nobody wants to really cheer too loud. They don't want to clap too much because it's a threat. And they feel it's like a scarcity mindset. They feel like, oh, this person's going to take my opportunity, or this person's like, I'm out. And I had a great conversation with Hamza Haq. Hamza, if you see this, like, shout out to you. Inshallah, we'll have you on an episode and we'll chat about it, because we have a very specific situation about this too. It's a chat about, but yeah, it's like the scarcity mindset of like, this person's good and they're my competition immediately. And what it does is create a scarcity mindset and create like a really difficult environment to like thrive in as an artist. And I can say this because in Brooklyn and LA, I've been there and I've worked in the studios, and it's not the same. And so yes, Sajad, I'll do another episode on that, but we'll get into that, because yes, these nonprofits specifically do like to juice our talent and not really give anything back for it, and then move on to the next person. Exactly, they'll just like find the next artist who they think is good or who's similar, and they'll just move on to the next one, rather than fully supporting anybody. Yeah, yeah, very interesting, pretty accurate. Sounds good. Yeah, it's been a great episode, guys. This was nice to get off my chest. As you can see, oh, Sajad said we need a union of some sort, bro. In For musicians, it's one thing. I think there is something that could be very great. Great, is that the right word? There's something that could be very powerful about having a union for like Muslim artists, even, because yeah, there's not really much that we have going for us to like help us like stand up for ourselves. I find I do a lot of that work. Like younger artists or up and coming artists will message me, and sometimes I'll like negotiate things for them, or I'll have conversations on their behalf, or I'll tell them what to say, because it's so there's nobody there. Like there's nobody there to stand up for us. So yeah, that a union would be a crazy thing. I don't know too much about unions, but Sajad said let's chat more on this. Yeah, please, let's chat about it, because I don't know too much about it. I know they can be powerful, but uh we could teach more on the business side. Yeah, 100%. I got online courses, bro. I have outlines for online courses for the business side of things that I've learned. So we can definitely do that. But cool. I'm gonna leave it there. I think I got through all the questions. Again, if you enjoyed this, if you got anything from this and it was beneficial, please share it with somebody. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and join the mailing list if you want more exclusive content that's not on YouTube, not on Instagram. Uh, Exclusive content, music, access to live shows, all that stuff. Join the mailing list. It'll be at the bottom of this video in my link in bio if you're on Instagram. And so yeah, that's a great way to end it. This dude said community over competition. That's what it's about. And that's why this podcast is called Unfiltered, because I just say whatever I want to say on the borderline of getting myself in trouble. But you'll see under the title, it says art, faith, and community. So yes, community over competition. Thank you guys for joining another episode of Raz Unfiltered. We are live streaming on YouTube every Wednesday at noon and every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Stay tuned for new episodes. Subscribe so you can join the live chat. Join the mailing list if you want more. We'll see you on Wednesday. Peace.